Let's connect politic ditto. We can trade places, get lifted in the staircases. Word up, peace incarcerated Scarfaces.
It's impossible not to compare Scarface and Carlito's Way. Both films involve some of the same actors, the same director, and similar gangster themes. But why are they so similar? Is it just to continue the gangster elements into another film for nostalgia value? Or is Carlito's Way sending a message about an important theme that went unfulfilled in Scarface? In this film analysis, we'll discuss how Carlito Brigante exists in an alternate universe where if Tony Montana hadn't died, but instead had gone to prison and came out with the ambition to give up a life of crime forever, he might have had the chance to achieve what he wasn't allowed to accomplish in Scarface. It's the message that completes Tony's character and shows the audience that trying to do good, even when surrounded by evil, is worth it.
That's right, sir. 5 years, and look at me. Completely rehabilitated, reinvigorated, reassimilated, and finally going to be relocated.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
Donuts. Package of 6, how much?
$1.12.
Oh! Too much.
1993 was a year when two iconic actors decided to act in roles that opposed earlier roles they had made famous in the 1980s. Michael Douglas's jobless Defense character in Falling Down reflects the corrupt capitalist society that his Gordon Gekko character created in 1987's Wall Street.
I lost my job. Well, actually, I didn't lose it. It lost me.
These people lose their jobs, they got nowhere to go. My father has worked there for 24 years. I gave him my word.
It's all about bucks, kid.
And in Carlito's Way, we see Al Pacino's rehabilitated assassin and dope dealer contrasting with his diabolical Tony Montana counterpart from 1983's Scarface.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! I'm free at last! So long, man. Have a good trip. Fuck you!
Carlito's Way is clever in its relation to Scarface because it plays with time. It's set in the mid-1970s, so Carlito's Way would be a prequel to Scarface, but it connects to Scarface as if it were a sequel. The comparisons between Carlito's Way and Scarface go beyond the similarity of the gangster elements, but also to the director. The legendary director Brian De Palma shot Scarface, where Pacino played a Cuban immigrant lusting after money, power, and women.
Even if I were blind, desperate, starved and begging for it on a desert island, you'd be the last thing I'd ever fuck.
And then De Palma returned to direct Carlito's Way, where Pacino, this time, played a Puerto Rican who wants to distance himself from his criminal past.
But as soon as I make my 75, I'm splitting.
Oh, that's right. You're gonna rent Ford Pintos to tourists in paradise.
Carlito recognizes the error of his ways and plans on trying to right what he wronged when he gets out of prison. We see this in how Carlito mends his relationship with Gail and how he wants to vacate the dangerous streets of New York for a safer life in the Bahamas. He even visits his former drug partner to tell him to his face that he has no intention to re-enter the drug game.
I'm retired.
Retired.
That's right.
Retired.
Prison made Carlito think long-term, with a realistic goal in mind. Tony was the total opposite. Tony lived for the moment. He didn't really consider the repercussions of his actions. He killed his best friend, he was constantly doing coke, he disobeys the order to kill the activists, thereby creating an unwinnable war with his more powerful and once business partner, Alejandro Sosa of Bolivia.
I tell you one time, don't fuck me, Tony. Don't you ever try to fuck me.
I told you a long time ago, you fucking little monkey, not to fuck me.
Hey, who the fuck do you think you're talking to, huh? You wanna fuck with me?
Carlito represents the new and improved version of Tony Montana, whereas Scarface is a plot-driven, self-indulgent fantasy with very little emotion. Carlito's Way focuses on emotion. For just as action-heavy and plot-driven as Carlito's Way is, it's also just as character-driven. It's a perfect mesh of both qualities. We discover a lot about Carlito's character and why he decided to change. We see that Carlito is a man of regret and loss, and who recognizes that he's wasted time on things that never showed any long-range value. Prior to going to prison, Carlito was like the Tony Montana character. He lived for the moment, ruthless, hurt people, sold dope, and didn't care about anyone's feelings. We see these traits reflected in the Benny Blanco character. Benny is a rising dope dealer and has no problem hurting people. Even Sasso mentions this to Carlito just before he and Benny have their beef.
What happened to you? What are you acting like this for? It doesn't make sense you should hate this guy, because this guy is you 20 years ago.
Never me. Never me.
Benny is obsessed with the dope game, nightclubs, and hurting anyone who gets in his way, just like Tony was in Scarface. That's why Carlito doesn't cut Benny Blanco any slack to even just conversate with him. He wants nothing to do with Benny Blanco because he reminds Carlito of himself, and he resents it.
I've been with made people, connected people. Who you been with? Chain snatching, jive ass, maricon motherfuckers.
El heroísmo de una revolución no los queremos, no los necesitamos.
Aren't you part of the Cuban crime wave?
What you talking crazy for? Eh? I'm a political refugee here, okay? So take it easy, don't talk crazy. I'm Tony Montana, a political prisoner from Cuba. And I want my fucking human right. Now. Just like the president, Jimmy Carter says.
To further understand the character of Carlito Brigante, we should first understand how Tony Montana was created. Scarface was written by the talented filmmaker and highly decorated Vietnam War veteran Oliver Stone. Stone, if you notice his work, often expresses a disdain for America in his films. Scarface, Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, JFK, and Wall Street, to name a few. His time served in Vietnam likely shaped his anti-American views, even though he willfully enlisted in the war, and then was given numerous accolades for his wartime participation and bravery.
I volunteered. I dropped out of college and told him I wanted the infantry, combat in Vietnam.
As an enlisted soldier, Stone chose to fight against the installation of communism in Vietnam by fighting for capitalism, only to then make himself rich in the film industry by creating anti-American and anti-capitalist movies.
The poor always being fucked over by the rich. Always have, always will.
Washing money? The fucking country was built on wash money.
The illusion has become real. And the more real it becomes, the more desperate they want it. Capitalism at its finest.
In addition to his blatant critique of America in his films, Stone has been known to support socialist and communist perspectives, as seen with his public admiration for international political figures like Vladimir Putin of Russia and Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. So, it's no surprise the Tony Montana character is depicted in a negative manner when contrasted through the lens of capitalism that Tony uses and corrupts to his benefit, and who has no problem betraying the people closest to him for money and power, as if socialists and communists are not widely known for the same negative traits. When we first see Tony, he's lying to the border officials of his past in Cuba. He thinks he's clever, but they see right through his lies. Before Tony came to America, he had spent time in a Cuban jail, he eventually admits, for buying dollars. He'll face jail time for money laundering later in the film too. So Tony was likely involved in the same crimes in Cuba that he will do here in America. It's also noted that he was a member of a hit squad of assassins, which was likely part of a political movement against the Castro administration, since communism and Castro are the first things he complains about.
You a communist? Huh? How'd you like it? They tell you all the time what to do, what to think, what to feel.
For a green card, he jumps at the chance to kill the Cuban commie, who arrives to the Freedom Town community with the other refugees.
It'd be a pleasure. I kill a communist for fun. But for a green card, I'm gonna carve him up real nice.
There is no mystery to Tony Montana. It's revealed within the first 13 minutes that he's a liar, an assassin, and is still motivated by political ideologies even though he left communist Cuba. He has the chance to start over and begin a fresh life in America without the dangerous lifestyle he had lived in Cuba. But Tony chooses not to change and work hard, but instead uses America's freedoms and capitalist opportunities against itself for his own personal gain. In Cuba, Tony was likely a low-level criminal, but once he came to America, Tony's criminal ways flourished and made him successful.
Who put this thing together? Me! That's who! Who do I trust? Me!
There's an obvious contrasting of American and Cuban political ideology portrayed in Scarface. It implies that in Cuba, under its communist dictatorship of Fidel Castro, it did not allow for large-scale crimes like the ones Tony eventually gets involved with in America, because the freedoms under communist rule do not exist. Everything in Cuba is highly monitored by government officials, or by snitches working with the government. Because of this tight control, it suggests the Cuban Communist government has a better and more positive influence on its people, because the Cuban people don't have the option to be affected by capitalist opportunities, and therefore don't have the option to corrupt themselves and others. But in America, an overall bad guy can become successful by way of dope dealing and murder. Scarface doesn't just imply this, it shows this by how Tony is able to kill people in broad daylight without repercussions.
Yes, man! Dare you!
And he's able to launder his drug money with the banker, showing that it isn't just Tony who's involved in criminal activity, but also American banks, and by implication, all of corporate America too. Although the film has a few harsh words for communism at the beginning, its critique against communism is quickly forgotten because the movie spotlights its true critique on American capitalism throughout the rest of the movie. Tony represents a subtextual message of political and economic ideologies.
Just some made him, Mama. He's a success.
He's a success, he tells his mother. However, his money and power can't allow him to achieve the one thing he truly wants.
I can't even have a kid with her, man. Her womb is so polluted. I can't even have a fucking little baby with her.
Beneath Tony's quest for unlimited power is the desire to start a family. He has no problem achieving the money and power on his own, but he needs a woman who will grant him that opportunity to have his child and build a family. That's why he's so infatuated with Elvira. She's beautiful, and he covets her from the first time he sees her coming down the elevator. He's not a ladies' man like Manny, who constantly pursues women. Tony is more monogamous, with a goal to have a nuclear family.
With the right woman, there's no stopping me. I could go right to the top.
Elvira might be pretty, but she's a bad choice for a mother, just as he's a bad choice for a father. They both have insane drug habits and are involved in illegal activities on a daily basis. It isn't until much later in the film do we learn of Elvira's inability to conceive. Tony demeans her with this information in front of Manny while at a restaurant. Elvira rightfully blows up and expresses her desire to leave him.
How dare you talk to me like that? I'm leaving you. I don't need this shit anymore.
It's the last time we see her in the movie. Her character arc ends there with her realization that she needs to leave Tony. Unfortunately, it comes at her public humiliation. After being caught on video laundering money, Tony is told he'll not have to serve a prison sentence if he kills an activist who is bringing attention to Sosa's enterprise.
This money, which is in the billions, is coming from your country. You see, you are the major purchaser of our national product, which is, of course, cocaine.
Alberto is an expert in the disposal business. He's going to help us fix our problem.
by Tony getting rid of this guy, it'll free up Sosa and his associates to continue their worldwide drug trade. Tony, being the assassin he was born to be, agrees of course. However, Tony's family values come into play when he sees the target's kids jump into the car Tony was supposed to blow up. Rather than killing innocent children and their mother, Tony decides to take the matter into his own hands.
You think I killed 2 kids and a woman? Fuck that! I don't need that shit in my life. You die, motherfucker!
As destructive and evil as Tony is, he cannot bring himself to kill a mother and her children, especially since he wanted his own kids, but wasn't able to have them. That's a line in the sand he won't cross. This choice dooms him, as it'll bring more attention to Sosa and his partners now. Tony's death, although rightfully deserved, echoes that now of a tragic hero. His one good value of appreciating family is the one that gets him killed. Just as Carlito is an alternate version of Tony, the same is true of Gail and Elvira. Both are short-haired blonde white women who go with Hispanic drug dealers. They both like to dance, and both women are vital parts of Tony and Carlito's stories. They're not pretty damsels in distress. Instead, they're directly involved in Tony and Carlito's choices and character arcs. They hold the key that allows Tony and Carlito to have or not have children, thereby allowing for the redemption theme to take effect.
Let's get out of here. All 3 of us.
Both Elvira and Gail symbolize the overarching message, and the only theme that truly matters in both movies, the nuclear family. Because Tony is an evil bastard who gets what he wants by hurting others, his price to pay for it is that he can't experience having a family of his own. Fate won't allow it. He was so caught up in Elvira's beauty that he didn't account for her inability to get pregnant.
I like you. I like you the first time I laid eyes on you.
Whether it's from her drug abuse like Tony claims, or for any other reason we'll never know, but Tony will never reproduce. Because Tony is a massively successful and powerful drug lord, his inability to pass on his genes to a child diminishes those achievements, because when he dies, his legacy dies with him. Carlito doesn't suffer from this problem because, as much drama as he involves himself in, his good intentions are pure. Carlito doesn't abuse capitalism. He works for a living. He wants to avoid criminal activity, although he could have been better at it. He had done time in prison for murder, and was then associated with several murder scenes throughout the story, and even kills 2 drug dealers during the scene with his cousin. So his own murder was inevitable. Karma works like that. But because of his genuine sincerity to leave that life, fate allows him to meet up with Gail again and get her pregnant. Although Carlito dies, he's able to get a second chance at righting what he wronged in his life by having a child who hopefully won't make the same mistakes.
Hey, remember me? Benny Blanco from the Bronx?
Carlito gets to know that not only will his soul pass on to his child, but that he didn't die for nothing. Tony, on the other hand, had all the money in the world, but he couldn't live again through his child. That's what Carlito earns, his redemption and his symbolic resurrection by having a child.
You wanna play rough? Okay. Say hello to my little friend!
There's always been a conversation about if Carlito's Way and Scarface are related or not. They are 100% related for many reasons, but specifically because Carlito's Way completes Tony's character by absolving his sins and having his memory live on through his child.